Hey, everybody, welcome on into another episode of WRAL Triangle and Two. I'm Luis Fernandez. He's Mark Bergin. And let's just get straight to it, Mark. We want to get started with the news of today, which is Monday, October 16th. The Carolina Panthers will have a new play caller. Frank Reich announcing that he will be turning over play calling to Thomas Brown, his offensive coordinator. They said back when this all went down, when Brown was hired, that eventually the play calling would be turned over to him. There was never really much of a timeline. And now we know the timeline is an 0-6 start. Mark, what are your early thoughts on this?
Luis, first off, it's tremendous to see your face. It's been too many moons since we've been on WRAL Triangle and Two. Panthers off to an 0-6 start heading into the bye week. And the question we had the last time we talked is, when does that first Panthers win come? And I'm looking at the schedule right now, and it's the Texans after the bye against CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. A lot's going to be made of that game. Colts are going to be without Anthony Richardson when the two teams play the following week. And then a one-win Chicago Bears team on Thursday Night Football. If you go those three games and don't lose it, and you don't win a game, at some point we might have to be calling for Frank Reich's job. Like, I don't think that's a hyperbole to say even in year one, because I look at this offense that is struggling. It's a unit that ranks 23rd in the NFL in total offense, 22nd in scoring at almost 19 points per game. Hard to win games that way. And then a quarterback in Bryce Young, who ranks 32nd in total QBR, 33.1. Panthers are struggling. And I'm usually not one to say, hey, fire a coach, fire a coach. But the Panthers haven't done rookie Bryce Young any favors this season. And there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made after the bye week.
Yeah, my big thing looking at this is switching play calling over to Thomas Brown. I think that's the best option moving forward. Like, whether or not it's going to immediately be better, I mean, who knows? It's Thomas Brown has, being the OC there for the first year. He was with the Rams from, I think, 2020 on. So he learned under, Sean McVay, great coaching tree to come from, great offensive experience to kind of learn from and grow from. But yeah, I think from in terms of what you can do in the moment to try and make the Carolina Panthers better, or at least act as if you're trying to make the Carolina Panthers better, changing up play calling is probably the best move. But really, I mean, to me, all of this 0-6 start, it just goes back to the roster itself. Like, this roster offensively, at least, leaves so much to be desired. That's part of the reason why they were as bad as they were last year. Part of the reason why even before the trade, they were picking pretty high. I think a lot of people look at what happened to the Panthers at the end of last season. And to me, that's a little bit of an anomaly, especially when I look at what this roster is. The style of play that they finished with last season, it has a low ceiling, but it also has a very high floor. And so you're able to come in there and win some games at the end, generate a lot of confidence. A lot of people were just, they were playing, for the coaching staff that was there at the time. So, it's different. But the roster is just, when 33-year-old Adam Thielen is the best option, the best option offensively, that's tough. That's really tough. Bryce Young's showing growth, but he can only do so much within that system.
There's two words that I want to focus on that you just said right there, Luis.
Yeah.
Last year is last year. And then being different, it is a different system. You look at this past Sunday against the Dolphins, where it's like, oh my gosh, you take a 14-point lead early and you lose the game 42-21. You have a 14-point lead in playing with the lead and controlling the ball and having Bryce Young serve it more of as a game manager. Just didn't happen against the Dolphins. Now, I know the Dolphins have a ton of studs offensively, and Mike McDaniel's innovating all of the NFL and everything, but you have a 2-score lead in the NFL. You've got to take care of business. I don't care if it's against a team significantly more talented than you.
I'm gonna speak out on that for a second.
Go ahead.
Because the Panthers have no business competing with the Miami Dolphins in any way. Being up 14-0.
I think it's more marginal in the NFL, Luis.
It's more marginal to an extent, but the margins with the Panthers and everyone else right now is very big, especially when they're playing the way they're playing. So it's great being up like 14-0 on the Dolphins, but like I said, I've said this. I feel like I say this every single time we talk about the Panthers. Wins and losses, I don't care about them this year for the Panthers. Truly, like just continue to show you're improving and getting better. And that's the issue. Is I don't know if you can say that. I think there was some improvement with the offense last game, but
let's compound this though, Lewis. You're the only unbeaten team, or the only team that doesn't have a win in the NFL. Yeah. There are now no undefeated teams either. So that microscope, it's really honing in on the Panthers even more so, because you don't have the Eagles that are undefeated or the 49ers that are undefeated anymore. And you're the only team in the NFL without a win so far this year.
Sure. And when I look at the rest of their schedule, right? I like you mentioning the Texans, Colts, and Bears. So I think the Texans are, if anyone's watched the Texans this year, they are playing some pretty good football. Their record doesn't really show it right now, but CJ Stroud obviously has played well through his first interception of the entire year in the last game. And their pass defense is also very good. So that's a little bit concerning. So my guess would be that ends up being a loss, but we'll see. Against the Colts without Anthony Richardson, I think I think that's the game that you can kind of circle and be like, hey, this could be the one. The Bears, who knows what Justin Fields' status will be at that point with the hand/wrist injury he's got going on. So we'll see about that one as well. I think if there was ever a time, bye week, next 3 games, if there was ever a time for the Panthers to say, okay, let's start putting our one foot in front of the other and figure this out a little bit, now is the time to do it.
I'm with you there, but I'm just looking at it. Stroud, I think most fans would say he should have been the number 1 pick. Again, this is just looking at the results, and it's not saying infrastructure and coaching. But then Minshew mania against the Colts, you're not going against Anthony Richardson. You're going up against a backup. And then Chicago, if Fields isn't out, Tyson Bagent, an undrafted rookie, is potentially what you're talking about. If you lose those 3 games, Lewis, again, I'm looking at it. You have an 0-6 start, but I haven't seen signs to say, hey, yeah, this is trending in the right direction. You lose those 3 games and you start at 0-9.
No, it'd be bad.
I'm telling you.
It's totally different too if they have that first round pick, obviously. But I kind of have a feeling that they will get the win in one of those 3 games. That's just kind of the vibe that I'm getting. It's just gut intuition type thing.
We'll see. It's the bye week. You want to keep this rolling?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go ahead and move on from the pros to college. UNC football remains unbeaten, winning a very sloppy game in a lot of ways against the Miami Hurricanes. The atmosphere was electric, Mark. I was not there, but from my understanding, people who were there said the atmosphere was pretty electric.
You would have absolutely loved it. The fireworks and the pandemonium in the pregame were fantastic. I want to thank everyone out in Chapel Hill because the hospitality was unbelievable. Lewis had a great time there with my older brother. Yes, you got to clean up the penalties if you're North Carolina, because if you clean that up, I don't even think this game is close. And I'm looking at Drake Maye this year, and I'm looking at the differences between this year and last year. And he didn't even play that great of a game. He throws for 273 and 4 touchdowns. And it's knowing when to throw the ball away when it's not there. It's not getting flustered after a big sack. It's next play. What do I need to do? And that poise and command of the offense is very impressive. But the difference to me, and we'll talk some about Tez Walker too, the 3 touchdowns. I'm not going to forget him. But Omarion Hampton running the football so you can control the clock and keep your defense off the field. He absolutely goes off. Do you actually have a defense in Chapel Hill this year? Last year, it was like a Swiss cheese defense. You actually have a defense that has come to play. Lewis, you got to be thinking like this North Carolina team, not just potentially winning the ACC, but college football playoff and the Tar Heels in the top 10 in the AP. They're playing very good football right now.
Yeah, they are playing very good football. And the Mack Brown today in his press conference, the way he phrased it was, with the penalties at least, was you want the team to not play passive, you want them to play aggressive. And so there are certain penalties that you're okay with, like those things happen. It's the aggressive penalties in play that, like, hey, it's a line. If I'd rather you make those mistakes every now and then than to play passive and have plays made against you. It's the penalties that happen pre-snap and post-snap that are problematic. And UNC did have a few of those. This UNC offense is incredibly balanced, whether it's Tez Walker finally taking the top off of defenses, and that's going to adjust the entire way that teams play UNC defensively. So that's going to be important to watch. Omarion Hampton has looked fantastic. The way he runs, he's very physical, but he also has such burst and speed. He's looked phenomenal. Drake Maye, while, once like that's the thing with Drake Maye this season, right? It's like, oh, he didn't play his best game. He still like tosses 250 and 4 touchdowns. Like, and it's the decision making. And like you said, and it's his running ability. Like if you're a defense playing against UNC, right? What do? You if you don't put 8 in the box, then Marion Hampton's going to run all over you. If you put 8 in the box, then you got Tez Walker and JJ Jones and Nate McCullum who can make you pay for it on that end. Okay, well, what do we do now? Let's man up and try and double team some of these guys. Oh, then Drake Maye, not only can he throw, but he also has the opportunity to run the ball. What Chip Lindsey's doing in terms of continuing to grow as an offensive coordinator at UNC, I think has been really good as well. And the defense is, like all UNC needed this year was to have an average defense. And I think that the defense has been above average. Truly, they've made some phenomenal plays, especially in the second half, barely allowing points in the fourth quarter of games. UNC's really taking some steps. Now it's, can you avoid the trip up? Can you avoid the trap against a bad UVA team, against a competitive Georgia Tech team, Campbell, and then you got that very difficult ending of the season. So don't look too far ahead with UNC. But if you want to, they got a chance to get into the play.
I want to go back to the penalties really quickly. There's an old slogan that Mike Tomlin uses. You'd rather say whoa than sick 'em. So again, you'd rather say curl back a little bit than, hey, like I need you to roll right now. In terms of the ability that you're giving. And I mean, if Omarion Hampton doesn't have the hot hand, British Brooks is pretty good in the backfield too. Tez Walker, though, the 3 touchdowns, you finally saw why preseason he was a Blitnikoff winner, and there was so much made of why isn't he granted eligibility. To me, it was on full display on Saturday night in Chapel Hill why he's considered an NFL talent and why he will get selected in the 2024 draft. I don't know where, I don't know how he stacks up against other receivers in the class, but you saw him showcase and demonstrate his ability down the field, and getting to see that with Maye, it was special to see in person, Lewis. Is this coming out party for the Tar Heels?
Exactly. His route running is solid. The way he bursts in and out of his routes is fantastic. One of the things I look for when it comes to those high-end receivers is how do you run a simple hitch? How do you run a comeback? Are you able to get that separation from the corner if they're playing man or whatever it might be, because they are afraid that you're going to go deep? Him and Drake have great connection on that. And I think it was 3rd and 20 after a holding penalty, maybe even 2.
Yes.
The crossing, I mean, like it's like a dig. He gets it and does not have the angle, but is somehow able to run around the defender. So their UNC is looking pretty good.
I'm so happy you mentioned that play, because in the stadium, Miami and the coaching decisions of Miami can be criticized to the high heavens, Lewis, after last week's game against Georgia Tech. But they opted against a holding penalty against the Tar Heels that would have pushed it back to like 2nd and 30, and they made it a 3rd and 20 instead. They declined the penalty, but North Carolina lose the down. And I just turned to my brother and I'm like, the way Drake Maye can sling the ball, that's a mistake, because you knew at the very least he'd be able to move it enough to get the Tar Heels into field goal range. He connects with Walker, and Walker takes it the distance for the score. Everyone in the stadium was like, all right, 3rd and 20, this isn't impossible. That's the mark of a great college quarterback. You're like, 3rd and 20, no big deal. It's like an NFL blitz down in distance, and you're cool with it. I think that speaks volumes of Drake Maye's ability. And then again, Tez Walker with the running catch, his ability to on full display there.
Yeah. Now don't fall for the trap games, but this is the way this UNC team is talked about.
I think they're going to take care of business, man. I mean, I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid, but they should be.
The amount of times you've heard this UNC team, whether it be the coaches or the players, bring up times in the past when they have failed to meet expectations, like the Georgia Tech game last year when they were 9-1. That's a prime example. You hear players talk about that all the time. Mac Brown has talked a lot about how the team continues to coach as if they've lost. And some of that may sound like coach speak, but I do think it matters when you're talking about like the way this culture at UNC is changing a little bit. He's just talking about, we were number 8 in the preseason back in like 2021, and they hadn't earned it. And then they go out and get crushed by Virginia Tech. You know what I mean? So it feels a lot different for this UNC team compared to other highly hyped UNC teams in the past. Speaking of highly hyped and very good football, the Duke Blue Devils, they took it to NC State. Just
in
like
football, Lewis.
I mean, 24-3 does not sound like. I think that this game was there was a lot more difference in that game compared to the score. Like if Henry Beelan only completed 4 passes, but 2 of them were touchdowns. Especially that huge, I think it was like 69-yard pass to Jalen Calhoun on an amazing kind of hitch route, double move. Guy just gets absolutely beat. So Duke didn't need to score a bunch of points because their defense was just that good.
And Lewis, you were there. We could argue that Duke should be undefeated if not for the lone loss to Notre Dame in a very close game. And if a player or two goes in the Blue Devils' favors, they would be undefeated right now. What did you see? Because this to me, again, I wasn't there. I was at the UNC game. But this to me feels like a changing of the guard in ACC football. Duke beating NC State. I know these teams traditionally haven't played year in and year out. The last time the two teams played was 2020. The last time Duke had previously beaten NC State was 2013. But what did you see? Because you were physically boots on the ground there. I
mean, Duke's secondary is phenomenal. No separation, constantly knocking the balls down. Duke's defense in general is just phenomenal. The way they play, there's constant pressure, a lot of havoc plays. I think I looked up their havoc rate recently, and I want to say it was around 22%. Havoc rate, for those that don't know, is a combination of tackles for loss, sacks, pass broken up, interception, and forced fumbles, all of those plays that cause havoc, divided by the total number of plays that a defense will face or an offense will face. So their havoc rate right now is 22% or something like that, which is really solid. That the defense is just one of the best units in the country. Truly. I think at this point, it is fair to say that Duke has the best defense in the ACC. What else do they have to do? You know what I mean? It's not State's defense. State's defense is good. They got one of the best players on the defensive side in Peyton Wilson, but it's one of the best defenses in the ACC. I saw, and a lot of this is going to depend on Riley Leonard's health, right? He was the update today was he's day-to-day, which was the update last week. But he was walking around, no crutches before the game, was even throwing the ball around a little bit, had a little bit of a limp, but he's progressing well from that high ankle sprain. Mike Elko said after the game on Saturday that he was close. But last time I checked, Duke was a 14-point underdog at Florida State, which feels a little disrespectful. If Henry Beelan plays better, I think that I'm not saying that Duke's going to go on the road and beat Florida State, but I think it's going to be a very competitive game, and that defense is going to be a big reason why.
I thought Notre Dame was a great litmus test for Duke, but this is going to be your true test of, have you really turned the corner as a program in year 2 under Mike Elko? And to hear all of this Duke praise from you, Lewis, it's unbelievable to hear. In all seriousness, as the UNC alum, it's unbelievable to hear.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think this is the litmus test for Duke. I think they've passed that already. I think the question now is not, hey, is Duke football good enough to compete year in and year out? I think the question now is, how high is the ceiling for Duke football? I think that's where they're at. Elko and that organization, what they have been able to do in terms of changing the culture there, and not to discredit David Cutcliffe at all, because obviously Duke and the success that he had there was great, except for those last few years. But it's just, I think the Blue Devils are great. I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if Riley Leonard gets healthy for a stretch run, the UNC Duke game is going to be so spicy, and I can't wait. That's going to be really good football.
Yeah. Here's where I'm at with it too. If Duke upsets Florida State, I know before the start of the season, you extended Mike Elko 2 years and it increases his buyout. I'm watching this like a hawk, Lewis, to say, okay, who needs a head coach right now? Like Michigan State and other teams. Duke needs to give Mike Elko what he wants, even if this game is competitive. If he knocks off Florida State, there's going to be other schools coming to say, what do we need to do to buy him out of his Duke contract? Because I think Duke's played that well, again, in football. Yeah. And I would argue they should have beaten Notre Dame. I would make that argument, if not for a dropped interception on a diving attempt by a Duke defensive back and that 4th and 16 scrambled by Sam Hartman, you're talking about a different outcome in Duke being undefeated to this point in the season, which is incredible, coming off a 9-4 season. And look, you mentioned Cutcliffe. Mike Elko took over a Duke program that had lost 13 consecutive ACC games. So what he's doing, it's remarkable. And I tip my cap to him, Lewis. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to come down to, right, like, if I look up Duke's schedule here really quick, because it's super interesting just how the ACC is going to kind of work out this year. Right. So you've got Duke, Florida State. Like I said, obviously that's very hard. Let's say they lose that game. Okay. Then the Blue Devils play at Louisville. I mean, Pitt
just beat Notre Dame.
Oh, they just beat Notre Dame, but Pitt crushed Louisville last weekend. Like, it was not close.
So you're like, with Louisville, it's kind of like one of the like shrug emojis. We don't really know. Pretty good offense, but it's exactly. Like, what team's going to show up?
And that Louisville game too. You look at it where Notre Dame lost a very tight emotional game at home against Ohio State, won a very tight emotional game on the road against Duke. That just felt like a natural letdown. Like, no matter what you do, that was just going to be a letdown. So I'm still not sold on Louisville. Wake Forest, Duke should win that one pretty handily. And then you're looking at, UNC. So I'm not.
Listen, it's usually a barn burner on the hardwood. We can make it a heck of a matchup on the gridiron to where we have Battle of the Blues football edition. Again, that's why it's like, even just this super on this video, Lewis, is ridiculous. Duke dominates NC State, and it's like, oh, are we talking about basketball, the number 2 preseason ranked Blue Devils? No. We're talking about football, and it's October the 16th, Lewis. I can't believe it, man.
I'm at the point now where I'm like, listen, if like Duke is it's the Duke football program being good does not surprise me anymore. I'm like, all right, yeah, they're good. Mike Elko's a fantastic coach. I'm gonna say, it is what it is. They're phenomenal. I think it's going to be really interesting. Like I said, even if Duke were to lose against Florida State, you're still looking at a situation, I think, where you maybe have like a 1-loss ACC Duke team versus a undefeated, no losses in the ACC UNC team in Kenan Stadium. Riley Leonard, if he's not back,
college game day.
I mean, right? Like, I don't know what else. Like, I guess they've been to one Duke game already, but this one would be at UNC. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's looking way far ahead. But what I'm saying, NC State aside, right now is some of the best football you've seen between Duke and UNC at the same time, especially. And a quick note on NC State football, I just want to throw this out here before we wrap up. They got to figure it out, man. They really do. Like, the defense, you can tell that the defense gets tired from having to be out on the field so much, having to essentially win the game. MJ Morris and the offense played better against Marshall, but Duke doesn't let you hit these like quick strike long touchdowns. They just don't. Like, they are, I think the longest pass they've given up so far this year is like maybe 30 something yards. They just don't let you do that. And so just, they were behind NC State was behind the sticks. They couldn't really get much moving. Passes were off, or there were a lot of drops. After the game, Peyton Wilson said, essentially, he apologized to NC State fans for what they're seeing. Like, we shouldn't be playing like that. And I think the way he phrased it was, we don't have to, we don't need to just get better. We also have to get tougher. So, a lot of work for NC State. Looking at their schedule, it only gets more difficult from here. So it may be a bit of a challenge for State to get to that 6-win mark and be bowl eligible. But
you've got a bye week before Clemson, Lewis, but certainly the offense, you needed a spark, and that's why you turned to MJ Morris. So See what happens with Dave Doran there. But again, it's just I'm looking at this super. Duke dominates NC State, and the fact that we're talking about football is just it's mind-blowing to me. And I hope that at least some of the things we've discussed here on today's episode of WRAL Triangle and Two, we're kind of manifesting it. But that UNC Duke game on November the 11th, if both teams TCB, and that's take care of business, Lewis. College game day in Chapel Hill. We had heck of a weekend there this past weekend. My brother and I have seen a lot of college campuses, Lewis, and to show him Chapel Hill this past Saturday, and my brother's like, yeah, the team's undefeated, but is there anything, Miami, it's a big game. It's like, yeah. And he's just like, but it was just a game day. It was just a game day in Chapel Hill. We had a wonderful time. So They keep that rolling. And look, there's a reason preseason Drake Maye was getting Heisman consideration, but you've got to beat the teams that you're expected to here in the coming weeks. So, how Duke plays against Florida State, though, I mean, that's the game this weekend from an ACC standpoint that I have circled on my calendar, because what happens with that, I think preseason, the expectation was, okay, if not Clemson, who are your teams? And the flashy pick was Florida State. And then even the bigger dark horse was North Carolina. And the way it's shaping up right now would be your ACC title game would be Florida State against UNC. But Duke could play spoiler, and Duke's hung with the best of the best thus far this season. The fact that they only give up 3 points to an NC State school that traditionally you would probably consider better in football. It's been that kind of year. And to have two teams in the triangle in the top 25, and between Duke and UNC, and between the two, they only have one loss. And again, we're recording this October the 16th. I think a lot of fans would take that in the triangle, despite a lot of the frustrations with how NC State has performed this year.
Get used to it, man. As long as Mike Elko is at Duke, I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah. Lewis, this has been awesome, man.
Exactly. And that is going to do it for us, WRAL Triangle and Two. Thank you all so much for watching, listening, wherever you get your podcasts, on the 99.9 The Fan YouTube page. Make sure you like and subscribe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. We appreciate everyone paying attention and watching. Let's see if we can manifest some more good football in the triangle, Mark. For Mark Bergin, I'm Luis Fernandez. We will see you all next week.
So long, everybody.